Hello, and welcome to this workshop on research processes. This workshop is brought to you by Academic Success Coaching at the University of Texas at San Antonio. First, if you are a UTSA student, please take a moment to sign in using the QR code on the screen or by visiting the link bit.ly/ASCOnlineWS. When you get to the sign-in sheet, it will ask you to enter your ABC123 as well as to select the workshop you are watching right now, which is research processes. During this workshop, we'll be discussing strategies for the research process, strategies to manage your time, as well as resources that are available to you and that you can use. First, take a moment to think of the different challenges that you might face in the research process. Students often share that some of the challenges that they face are that the process is overwhelming, they don't know where to start, and there's not enough time. During this workshop, we'll be talking about some strategies to help overcome these challenges. Within the general research processes, you can think of a few different topics which we'll be talking about. First, think about your assignment and know exactly what is expected of you. We'll talk about the research process, finding research as well as reading research, organizing information, and paraphrasing. So first, it's really important that you know your assignment. These are some questions that can help you to understand what your assignment is and what is expected of you. First, how long does it need to be? What is the end product going to look like? What research do you need to include? What should be included in your paper and presentation? And what visuals, if any, should be included? And where can you find all of this information? Professors often provide this information in their syllabus or in a separate assignment sheet that you can find on your course management system Blackboard. Another thing that can be helpful is breaking down your assignments. Professors may give different lengths of assignment requirements. Some provide a lot of details, some provide less. This is just an example of what instructions that your professor may provide could be. In this example, write an 8 to 10 page paper on a problem related to what we've discussed in class, provide evidence from class readings and outside readings, then discuss your solution to the problem using research. It can be helpful to break this down so that it doesn't seem so overwhelming. One thing you can do is break it up into a checklist and use that checklist as you're going through the process of writing or completing your assignment. In this example, I might break it up into an 8 to 10 page paper, the problem, which includes evidence from in-class and outside readings, a solution, which includes evidence from research, and you might also know that for your class, your professor expects certain things of all written assignments. So for example, if you know that your professor expects you to write in a particular format, then make sure to include that information on your checklist as well so you don't forget. Now let's talk about the research process. We all know that the research process involves researching, writing, and then turning the assignment in, right? Nope. The research process is a lot more complex than just a linear process of researching, writing, and turning it in, even though we might have done that in the past. Instead, think of the research process more as a circular cycle. In that cycle, you can think about it as discovering your topic and your purpose, gathering information, reviewing and categorizing, writing a draft, revising an edit, and you may have to go back and adjust your topic and your purpose, gather more information, so on and so forth. Within this cycle, you can think of it being an iterative process where you might have to go back and gather information throughout the process as you're writing the draft, as you realize you might need more evidence to help support your claims. And you may need to go and reorganize the paper. So think of the research process more as a cycle and an iterative process rather than a linear process. What that means is that this process takes a lot of time, something that we'll cover later on in this workshop. Now, finding research is a process in itself know before you get started on this process where you are drawing your research from. Some of this may be explained by your professor of what kind of research you should include. In the example given before, it included in-class readings as well as outside research. For that outside research, what types of sources do you think you'll be able to use? That could include books, scholarly journal articles, statistics and reports, and expert opinion. If you don't know how and where to find these resources, use the resources that are available to you, including librarians and your professor. We'll talk about the library resources a little bit later. Now, the process of reading research can also be very complex. One of the things that you can do is ask yourself a set of questions to be able to understand really what an author is arguing and the evidence that they are providing. First, what is the argument? What evidence is used to support that argument? What are the author's conclusions? And how does what this author has to say help support my information and that I'm including in my paper? One example is if you're writing a paper that involves solutions, are those different authors helping you support that claim or solution? One thing that can be very helpful is to take notes throughout the process of reading your research. That way you don't get into the situation where you're at the end of reading a bunch of research and you don't remember where information was coming from. So come up with a note-taking system for yourself, whether that be online, on paper, in the margins, so that you know where the information is coming from. We'll talk about some organization methods that you can use in just a few minutes. In addition to taking notes, it's important to make sure that you're citing where you're getting that information from as you go. Again, you can forget very easily where something is coming from, and then you have to go try to find it again. So make sure you're putting the author and the page number of where information is coming from. Another thing that can be helpful is paraphrasing in your own words rather than copying and pasting information from articles and books and other things that you might be reading. The reason for this is it can be very easy to forget whether or not you copied and pasted and you're quoting directly, or if you've already put it in your own words. If you do decide that you need to copy and paste because the author has said something so wonderfully that you can't possibly paraphrase it in any other way, then make sure that you have clearly indicated in your notes that you're quoting from the author and that they are not your own words. Otherwise, it's a good idea to paraphrase so that you are understanding what you're reading as you're going along, and then you can use that in your final paper. There's lots of different ways to take notes from readings. It's a good idea to come up with a system. If you have paper copies, a couple of the things that you can do is use sticky notes, highlighting, making annotations in the margins. That way you can find information very clearly. This process can also help make sure that you are paying attention as you're reading and you don't end up in the situation where you've read several pages and you don't really understand what it is that you've been reading. If you're using electronic versions of articles and books, you can use the tools that are built into Adobe, for example, to highlight and to make notes in the margins. That way you can find that information again much easier. Now, some methods for organizing and categorizing that information. Once you've read and you've taken notes, then you can start to organize that information in ways that make sense to you. One thing that I would recommend, though, is that you start this process at the beginning rather than waiting until after you've read all of your articles, because this can also help you figure out what else you need to read to fill in the missing ideas and missing evidence. The three methods that we'll talk about are matrix, note cards, and graphic organizers. First, we'll start with a matrix. The idea behind a matrix is to be able to see different categories of information that are coming from different sources. There's lots of different ways that you can use matrices in research, studying, and coming up with ideas. For this example, the matrix is showing you columns from different sources and then main ideas that are coming from each one of those sources. So what you might do is you might be reading one article or one chapter, and you're drawing some evidence from that. You can start to categorize those based on what you're reading. From each source, though, it's important to remember that not all of these blocks will be filled in, because not every article or piece of research that you might be reading is going to support all of the ideas that are in your final paper. So from each one of these sources, you might have one or two of these concepts or main ideas covered. Then when you go and write your paper, then you can categorize the information in those different main ideas and concepts. That way you can understand what different authors are saying about the same topic. You can think of it like a conversation that's happening between different authors to help support your ideas. Another method that you can use to help you categorize information are note cards. An alternative, this is sticky notes or PowerPoint slides. On each note card or sticky note or PowerPoint slide, you're writing one idea that's coming from each one of the pieces of research that you're reading. Again, it's a good idea to paraphrase rather than write word for word what you're drawing from each one of those articles. It's also a really good idea to put the citation on each one of these note cards so that you can find that information easily later and you don't have to worry when you have to cite it in your paper. Then you can start to categorize the information into piles if you have physical note cards, or into groups if you're using PowerPoint slides, by the different categories that they might be fitting into. Then when you're writing your paper or doing your final research assignment, then you can go through each one of these piles and you have that conversation that's happening between a bunch of different authors about a particular topic. A third organization method is graphic organizers. These can really help if you don't feel like you're a linear thinker and you're having a hard time coming up with different categories, because you can generate this as you go. In this example, it's showing a mind map, which is breaking off into smaller categories: benefits, tips, and process, and then into smaller branches from there. The benefit of a graphic organizer like this is it allows you to see information in a different way than you would if you were to put it into a more linear format like an outline, or even something like a matrix. Now let's talk about paraphrasing. Paraphrasing can be a very difficult concept to master. So let's talk about the differences first. Summarizing is when you're taking a lot of information and you're distilling it down into its main idea. Quoting is when you're taking the exact words and putting it in quotations in your final assignment. For both of these, it's important to remember that you are still citing exactly where that information is coming from. Check to make sure that you know what the expectations are from your citation style that you might be using for your class. Paraphrasing, however, is not necessarily distilling it down to its main idea and not using the exact same words, but something in between that. You are putting the author's words into your own words and explaining the idea that's coming from that particular author. Again, you have to make sure that you're citing properly for paraphrasing. Paraphrasing can be really difficult because you might be tempted to just change some words around and take a thesaurus to them and call it a day. However, that's not appropriate for paraphrasing, and that still can be considered plagiarism. So one strategy that you can use for paraphrasing is to read the original information, make sure that you understand it, then cover it up so you're not looking at the exact words, and try to explain it out loud. Your explanation will be more likely to be close to a paraphrase of the original information. This does require a lot of practice, so continue to practice paraphrasing as you're going through and reading your different pieces of research. Now let's talk about managing your time. As mentioned before, the research process is cyclical and it can take a lot of time, so it's important to plan ahead so that you're able to get everything done that you need to. One strategy is to break down your tasks. Rather than writing work on research paper in your to-do list or in your planner, you can break it down into smaller pieces. There's a few different ways that you can do that. One example is by mini task. That can include something like finalizing the problem, doing the research, meeting with the librarian, meeting with your professor, taking notes, drafting, meeting with a writing tutor, etc. Make sure that the mini tasks that you have are appropriate to your particular assignment. Another way that you can do this is by breaking it down by section of the paper. So if you know you have to include certain sections in your paper, then you can think about writing them by those different sections rather than thinking of it as one big assignment. An example of that might be breaking it into the abstract, intro, problem statement or scenario, methods, discussion, conclusion, etc. One of the important things about this strategy, though, is that you don't necessarily have to work on the pieces in order, and you can kind of jump around if that makes most sense to you. Sometimes students say that it's really difficult to write the introduction. So don't start with the introduction, start with maybe a middle section of the paper based on what you know and what you've researched so far. Then you can go back and do the introduction later on in the process because then you already know what your entire paper will be about. Once you've broken down your into mini tasks, write those down as mini deadlines. Some of you may have deadlines that are provided by your professor already. Some of you may have only one deadline at the end of the semester or at the end of a few weeks that you need to meet. So the idea behind writing down mini deadlines is that you have to do the assignment piece by piece rather than thinking of it as just one big assignment. This is something that you can write down in a calendar or in a planner, writing down the things that you want to do. This is just an example where this person would be finding articles, reading each one of the articles, meeting with the professor, making an appointment with the writing center, revising, and then a final due date so that they make sure that they know when that is due. You can get some resources for different planning calendars on our website, on our resource page, where you can download calendars for the term or the semester and different planners. You definitely don't need to get an expensive planner just to be able to plan out your mini deadlines and what you need to work on. You can also use electronic versions and decide when you want to work on specific assignments. So if, for example, you're working on your English project, then you can decide when you want to work on that project and break it into chunks throughout the week. That way, you're making sure that you're dedicating time to that particular assignment and not leaving it till the end of the week or even the end of the semester. Do what works for you, and this might require some experimentation to figure out a method that works best for you. Then break it down further. Once you know that you have certain time set aside to work on your project, then you can break it into what's called the power hour. The power hour is a way to divide up your time very intentionally. For the first 10 minutes, you're previewing what it is that you need to work on. You're also setting goals for yourself so that you can try to meet those goals by the end of that hour. Then for the next 40 minutes, you're working on a particular task. This might include reading an article and taking notes during that time. It might be drafting a section of your paper. Then at the end of that 40 minutes, for 5 minutes, take a break. It's a good idea to set a timer so that you don't end up taking a longer break than you intended. Then for the last 5 minutes, review. What were you able to get accomplished during this power hour? Did you meet your goal? If you didn't meet your goal, how can you change it for the next power hour? Then you can put these power hours back to back, or you can switch to a different class or a different topic and work on something else for a little while. An alternative to the power hour is something called the Pomodoro. In the Pomodoro, it's 25 minutes on task and a 5-minute break. And again, you can put these back to back or just do one at a time so that you're able to make progress on an assignment. 25 minutes is a lot less intimidating than sitting and working for several hours at a time. You can find different resources online to be able to find things like a Pomodoro timer, or you can go to tomato-timer.com to be able to pull one up, and that'll just time for you. Finally, let's talk about your campus resources. If you're at UTSA, then all of our campus resources are still available to you. Some are still available virtually. Some will be starting to be available in person as well. These resources include tutoring and supplemental instruction, your academic advisor, career center, the writing center, counseling and mental health services, your professor, and academic coaching. More specifically for your research, here are some resources that might help. The first is the Writing Center. You can make an appointment by going to their website and signing up for an account and setting up an appointment with a writing tutor. Appointments are available for students at all stages of their writing process, so you don't have to have a complete writing project done to be able to go and meet with a Writing Center tutor. Another resources that can be very helpful in this process are the UTSA libraries. You can go to their website at lib.utsa.edu. You can find your subject librarian and set up a meeting with that person to be able to help you find the research that you need for this assignment and others. I'd also highly recommend meeting with your professor throughout this process so that you can get feedback and help in places where you might be struggling. And finally, academic success coaching, which can help you through this process with your time management, finding resources, and managing that sometimes overwhelming process. Academic success coaching at UTSA has a few different resources that are available to you. We have one-on-one coaching, workshops, and resources available on our website, along with recorded workshops. To be able to find out information about all of these resources, you can go to our link page, utsaacademiccoach.carrd.co. You can email us at academic.coach@utsa.edu, or you can give us a call at 210-458-4694. We also recommend that you follow us on social media so you can find out what workshops are coming up, as well as other announcements that we might have. Academic coaching is a one-on-one service where you can meet with an academic coach to talk about different academic study skills and topics that you are interested in learning more about. Academic coaching is different than tutoring and supplemental instruction in that it is not content specific, but instead you'll be meeting with an academic coach to talk about study skills that can help you across all of your classes. These are by appointment only. To request an appointment, fill out a form at bit.ly/ASC-interest. When you get to that form, it'll ask you if you're a current undergraduate student. Then it'll ask you for some basic information so that we can schedule an appointment for you. In addition to academic coaching and our one-on-one service, we also have lots of workshops that are available. You can visit our website to find out more information about those workshops. Before you close out of this workshop, I ask that you take a few minutes to please complete an evaluation. Same process as signing in. You can go to the link bit.ly/ASC-online-WS-eval, or you can use the QR code. When you get to the evaluation, please select this workshop, research processes, and it'll ask you a series of questions about your experience in this workshop. We definitely appreciate your feedback so that we can continue to improve our services. Thank you so much for attending and participating in this workshop. Hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe for more study skills content. Check out our other workshops and quick tips available on our channel, and learn more about academic success coaching at UTSA by visiting the links in the description. Go Runners!